So, standard operating procedure. If the art exhibition is in a larger gallery or institution, there will be a catalog. Smaller galleries will normally self-publish a catalog, and it will be probably a smaller to medium-sized enterprise, normally self-published. Larger exhibitions normally get the support from major publishing agents, your Rizzolis, your Taschens, your Phaidons, so on. This is the catalog and exhibition book from the Kerry James Marshall Mastry traveling show. Very grateful that I got to see this with my own eyes, but even happier that I got to have this book to be able to revisit all of the wonderfulness of Kerry James Marshall's work. I love the fact that it always makes note of where it visited. So it was at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, the Met in New York, and MoCA here in Los Angeles. So I'm not going to over-explain a lot of it. Really would just like to encourage people to explore more of Kerry James Marshall's work. But also, this book also acts as a reader. It kind of gives a bit of context to why he's done what he does, but also in context with other artists that are working within the same time. Shout out to Fred Wilson. This was the Minding the Museum project from the Maryland Historical Society in Baltimore. Always been a great fan of that particular project. But as you explore Kerry James Marshall's oeuvre and looking at the things that he's done over his career and all of the works, there's just something really genuinely honest and ambitious about just the stories that he tries to tell. So here are plates from pieces that were in the show. And I believe all of the pieces and elements of the show are present here within these plates. Pardon the glare, still trying to get this lighting set up proper. And again, seeing the plates in the book is one thing. Seeing this wall-sized is a totally other thing. And as usual, I'm not going to flip through every page, but enough so that you understand the scope and scale and hopefully entice you to purchase, pick this up and explore this in your own time as well, which is the purpose of this. But this book and this exhibition really just meant a lot to me for the time that it came out. And this piece always struck me quite a bit. I've always loved paintings that I could visually feel the weight of the fabric, because fabric is a beautiful medium to me. So being able to see that was a really great piece. The other thing that's great is that it included a lot of writings as well. Fiction, near futurism, as coined by Shessa Garbett, and just observations of things. No artist is a single note. You cannot limit their works to just what you see. There's always so much more on the horizon. I didn't grow up overly playing video games, but the ones that I was drawn to tended to be the Resident Evils and the Parasite Eves or Myst or these role-playing games. But one used to really attract my attention more than other, which was Metal Gear Solid. And really, really was fascinated by that. That and Final Fantasy VII, but Metal Gear had this, I don't know, this really grand sense of cinema to it. It was probably one of the more cinematically ambitious games that I ever played. And that was produced by a man named Hideo Kojima. So when we heard word that he was developing a new game called Death Stranding, I was curious about it, Wasn't sure if I would actually play it or not, but watching the playthroughs, watching the release, it felt like watching a film that was never going to be released, but that you could take part in should you choose. This book is the art of that particular game. And when we get into talking about cinematics, one of the most important things in cinema outside of, staging where you're going to tell the story is, who are the characters? And when we get into character design, uniforms, gadgets, and things of that nature, well, it helps you feel more rooted in the world that you're participating in. And when I tell you that they consistently knock this out of the park, but none more so than in this particular game. I probably did something I've never done before with this particular game, which is I watched on YouTube for more hours than I am willing to say. I watched playthroughs, people actually playing through the game and watching the cinematics of it as if it were a movie, as if it were a film, because the same storyboarding process times 20 that goes into a film goes into making an actual epic video game. Because you want to create an immersive world, you want something that has tens of hundreds of hours of gameplay to get lost in. And so the story has to be cohesive but expansive with enough choose your own adventure room within it. And when I tell you that they nailed this. So this is a book that is really great for, honestly, just inspiration to think larger, grander scale. I always love books that are landscape format. Gives you a greater sense of occasion. Pulls you more into the worlds. But more importantly, there's gold foil here on the edges of the pages. Again, these little elements that really kind of bring you into it. And if you've played the game, you understand the importance of those things. But you can be through and through and through, not just in the development of the world, but even in the paraphernalia and surrounding peripheral things in the ephemera. Having those elements and those notes as nods that even the book itself is a part of that world, well, that's just a really cool thing. So shout out to this game. And shout out to everything that comes from whomever gives this book more than just a second look. Fun fact, I spent 20 plus years in the fashion, retail, product development world. But I always secretly wanted to be in the greater world of design. Maybe not so secretly. Understanding how visual communication works, understanding how campaigns are rolled out, but then also understanding how industrial products are made and explained and brought into this world. All of those have always fascinated me. And learning more about the world itself, learned a lot of it through a publication called Monocle magazine. And Monocle, hilariously, is really just a project of the larger company known as Winkreative. And Winkreative, so great at what they do that at the end of one year, they just published a book-thick newspaper-ish magazine of here's how cool we are in the work that we've done. And it is work, collections, and essays from the work of Winkreative. And yes, these are things that they have actually done, like new livery for airlines and branding for whole regions of countries, things that I didn't even know were like possible to do. And in the field of design, everything is going to need explanation, whether it is wayfinding or what you see once you find your way to something within a hotel or within an actual country. Their breadth and depth of the work that they've done is very inspiring to me because, again, someone had to imagine these things that we take for granted. I was always curious, but who designed the uniforms? Who designed the lounge? And then who captured the images of it and staged it in a way to communicate that? Those are not the same people, but they may all be working off of the same creative briefs. And so to see an agency that's doing all of these things, we almost attempted to turn Burntsienna into a research design agency. And I mean, it's not too late for it. Winkreative's been around for at least a quarter of a century, at least. They've designed packaging, magazine layouts, automotive campaigns. Goodness gracious, like, it seems like they do everything, and they do it really well. But if you look at it, the through line has always been visual communication and engagement and perhaps a bit of titillating excitement. And it's the most fascinating thing to me. I always thought this was fantastic, of color groupings. But my goodness, this is showing off by stating facts. And they say it's not flexing if it's a fact. So if you were thinking that what you were doing was extra and doing too much, hope that you look at something like this and feel like, well, maybe I'm not doing enough, actually. Maybe I could do a bit more. Sometimes just need to take a second and let your work catch up with you. And then, maybe publish it and share it with the world. There was a point in time when I was a huge denim head. Very great fan of finding different weights and being able to identify them by hand and looking for the selvage, looking for different whiskering and looking at different aging recipes, which got me into vintage collecting and repurposing, kind of around the same time that a lot of people did, 2010 to 2011-ish. And I remember going into a double RL shop and happening to see this book on the counter, which I don't believe I was supposed to see. This book I later found in a secondhand shop, actually. No, take it back. It was a book sale at Hennessy and Ingle at their old location. And I was able to get this book, and what it is a brilliant, hyper-real, chef's table level archive of vintage menswear examples. And that's a big deal for me because it merges photography, which I love, with fashion and a visual tactility of fabrics, which I also love. And there's a bit of Japanese encyclopedic explanation of certain things, which, ding, 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 research. But the quality and just the scope and the detail in the photographs is so fantastic. This is a catalog, period, full stop. And if you are researching ideas for a new fashion collection or your own personal style, the references of things that have been, my goodness, kind of outnumbers some of the things that we are creating. Maybe, as my guy Maurizio Donati would say, we don't need to create anything new. Maybe we just need to go find all the old things that no one's wearing anymore, repair them, reimagine them. Because there's some amazing things that could be repurposed for today. Maybe even used for the same things that it was originally meant to be used for. Maybe we'd find ourselves rediscovering our decorum. Or being more willing to venture out further into the elements. Or just ride on and on. Sometimes It's just about playing with fabrics. Other times, it might be the idea of, what would this jacket look like as a bag? What would happen if we found a way to turn this jacket into a bag that could also be a jacket? Or if you're creating a film, you need things that are period correct. Maybe you don't need to replicate things through wardrobe. Maybe you just need to find originals. That'll do for authenticity. Although some garments may be haunted. Buyer beware. But even this, like, can't think of how many times I've seen leather and wool combined. But there it is. So these ideas of taking something that was old and applying it anew, well, that's no different from sampling in hip-hop. It's no different from a jazz standard. It's no different from a cover song. Energy doesn't disappear, it just changes form. So what could we do with the energy of what's already come before us? Let's go find out. Let's see. Let's make something new. In San Francisco, there is a lot going on downtown. But one of the coolest things outside of the SF MoMA is the Museum of the African Diaspora. And they hosted this exhibition at one point called Dandelion. And one of my clients at the time, Pocket Square Clothing, who are also very good friends of mine, we got tapped for an opportunity to sell some pocket squares in a shop within that particular exhibition. And once we saw the way that it came out, it was really, really impressive. But this is a collection of photographs of menswear and dandies from around the world. And this is all shot by Shantrelle P. Lewis, published by Aperture. Sorry, Shantrelle. I wanted to make sure that I had your full name right. But the cool thing of this is, starts with some level setting. What is a dandy? Short history of dressing up. But then goes to capture men of color, specifically black men of the African diaspora, taking menswear to places that maybe it hadn't been, and then using photography to be able to capture that. Also see a couple old friends in here too, which is hysterical. And it's really one of those things. Wow, this is super funny. Like really seeing people that like I actually know. What's up, Steve? Watching the documentation of menswear in a contemporary way, but also in classic ways. Shout out to Jadena for the song Classic, man, but also Leon Bridges. I got Ouija Theodore, the Brooklyn Circus. Speak of the man. There was a lot of talk about menswear had kind of taken a backseat, had kind of gone quiet, and there was a time when it had a great resurgence, early 2010s. And I do believe that coming out of the pandemic, we'll see another resurgence of this as the athleisure time kind of passes its way on, and it gives way to a new way of making a statement. Maybe not so much power dressing, but dressing with intention, dressing for respect, dressing for form. Shout out to T. Michael and Norwegian Rain. But also just dressing as a sign of good manners. And for those of us from the Midwest or the South or any first generation or immigrant child, you understand how important presentation really is and how it kind of becomes a bit of an armor in your own visual essay that speaks for you before anyone can make an assumption about you, and sets the bar very high for where the expectation of how you should be treated is. And so this book, highly recommend for anyone looking to change, update, or get back in touch with their style, because tailoring beyond menswear, shout out to Roger B, is not something that is going anywhere, because the traditions are there for a reason, but we could shake them up a little bit. How about a remix?